Welcome to another lecture. To frame our discussion, we consider the multifaceted life and public work of Enes Kanter Freedom, a case where professional sport intersects quite directly with human rights advocacy, international politics, and the economics of global media. I am Alexei, and today we will approach the subject with the same care we reserve for a difficult proof. Step by step, context before inference, inference before conclusion.
Hi, I'm Sexuality. I will anchor. I will jump in with questions as we go. Hopefully the simple ones that make the hard parts clearer.
Let's begin with a structural overview. In lay terms, Enes Kanter Freedom is a former NBA center and a prominent human rights activist. Imagine balancing on a tightrope between the entertainment economy of elite basketball and a megaphone aimed at authoritarian abuses. Each step visible, each misstep costly. He played 11 NBA seasons and upon U.S. naturalization in 2021, legally added freedom to his name to signal his advocacy priorities. Along the way, he turned his shoes into signposts. Free Tibet, Free Uyghur, Free China. Even a Winnie the Pooh motif, co-designed with the dissident artist Badiou Cao, to critique censorship taboos.
Professor, may I ask something simple first? When people hear about his activism, which governments are we actually talking about here?
It's him to understand the breadth. He has criticized abuses in Turkey, China, Russia, Iran, North Korea, Venezuela, and regimes across parts of the Middle East, with personal stakes especially acute in Turkey due to his support for the Glen movement, and in China due to his focus on forced labor and minority persecution. For clarity of terms, the Glen movement, also called Hizmet, emphasizes education and service. Turkey designated it a terrorist organization after 2016. We should also define an Interpol Red Notice as a request to locate and provisionally detain someone for extradition, not an arrest warrant per se, and a diplomatic boycott relevant to the 2022 Beijing Games means officials abstain while athletes still compete.
So, why does this matter now? Like, beyond basketball highlights?
Because the stakes are contemporary and systemic. We observe how athlete speech can collide with multinational revenue and state censorship in real time. After his October 2021 posts and on-court shoes, Chinese platforms stopped streaming Boston Celtics games. In parallel, Turkey canceled his passport in 2017. Prosecutors sought charges, and later a bounty listing appeared in 2023. These events exemplify transnational repression risks faced by outspoken diaspora figures. Historically, he has been misunderstood as merely partisan, yet his stated frame is universal human rights. The criticism lands across multiple regimes, not just one government or ideology.
Maybe the best place to begin is by asking for a quick history. How did he get from youth basketball to all of this?
Let's start with the history. Born in Zetrich in 1992 to Kurdish-Turkish parents, raised in Turkey, early development with Fenerbahce moved to the United States in 2009 for prep school. The NCAA later declared him ineligible at Kentucky for receiving approximately $33,000 in excess benefits from Fenerbahce. Yet in 2011, Utah drafted him third overall. Across the Jazz, Thunder, Knicks, Trailblazers, and Celtics, he averaged 11.2 points and 7.8 rebounds over 748 regular season games, an elite offensive rebounder by modern standards. A signal achievement. In April 2021, he set Portland's single-game rebound record with 30 boards, adding 24 points.
Isn't it interesting how his public persona also leaned into humor? Like the WWE 24/7 title cameo in 2019 at Madison Square Garden, and the Stash Bros era with Steven Adams. It suggests he understood theatrical moments even before the protest shoes became a global story.
Indeed, the WWE bit, quickly winning then losing the belt, while flashing a Celtics jersey to a New York crowd, demonstrated fluency in the grammar of spectacle. Now, the activism escalated in visible ways. In May 2017, Turkey canceled his passport, leaving him briefly stranded in Romania before returning to the United States. He later described statelessness risks and security concerns, with ESPN reporting an FBI-issued device for immediate contact due to threats. That same autumn, his Free Tibet and Free Uyghur shoes coincided with the cessation of Celtic streams in China. In 2022, he was traded to Houston and waived. He argues this owed to his China criticism, while NBA Commissioner Adam Silver publicly denied any punitive action and emphasized his right to speak. More recently, in 2024, he attended the State of the Union as House Speaker Mike Johnson's guest, signaling continued policy engagement and an intent to run for Congress in 2028 when eligible by citizenship tenure. In March 2026, he funded a public iftar in Gaza feeding 1,000 families, and in August 2026, he declared for the 2027 WNBA draft based on self-identification, framing it as a call for equal application of current rules. The WNBA responded with language on justice, equity, inclusion, and rejecting use of transgender people as political pawns. A brief personal reflection, if I may. Balancing conviction with professional duty reminds me of chess endgames. The board appears simple, yet one imprecise move can foreclose entire lines of play. In this context, we study not only what was done, but what could be done differently, without losing the initiative. That is to say, how to protect the king while advancing a pawn to the 8th rank. Moving forward, 3 questions organize our analysis. First, a historical what-if concerning NCAA eligibility in 2010-2011. Second, a counterfactual on what might have followed had Chinese platforms continued streaming Celtics games in 2021. Third, a present-day inquiry into unresolved issues in his activism and the surrounding systems.
Professor, what if the NCAA had ruled Kanter eligible in 2010? Would a season at Kentucky under John Calipari have actually changed much?
Mathematically, the baseline is high. He was drafted 3rd overall without playing a college minute. Eligibility might have improved short-term optics, potentially smoothing the amateurism narrative and yielding earlier endorsement structure or a slightly different team fit on draft night. The more interesting effect is narrative compounding. A Kentucky season under national spotlight would have produced a different public origin story, possibly amplifying brand equity through March visibility. Would it have transformed his activism arc? Probably not in substance, but it might have shifted sequencing. A larger early platform can accelerate later messages, though his eventual advocacy derived more from geopolitical events, cardboard, Turkey, 2016, and after, than from draft status.
So, I guess the career trajectory changes at the margins. Better visibility, similar core outcome. But could defense or fit critiques have evolved differently with a year of college tape?
To elaborate, additional tape may have marginally updated priors on defensive mobility and scheme versatility. Such updates influence role, not identity. In simpler terms, a 1-year Kentucky sample would likely not erase later matchup targeting, yet it could have reframed expectations entering the league, potentially altering early role assignments and the patience granted by front offices. The draft slot might shift by a place or two. The long arc is rebounding specialist with high interior efficiency, firefight, likely remains.
Professor Alexei, What if Chinese platforms had continued streaming Celtics games after his October 2021 criticism? How would athlete activism look then?
If streaming had continued, we would infer at least two shifts. First, the perceived cost curve of speaking out would flatten. Players, teams, and sponsors might treat principled dissent as compatible with market access, reducing the chilling effect. Second, media narratives would decouple athlete speech from immediate financial sanction, allowing the NBA to highlight pluralism without triage between values and distribution. Global media dynamics could then evolve toward tolerance of controlled controversy, rather than binary blackout. Of course, the visibility of his shoes and statements might have been lower in China due to content moderation. Yet the absence of a total cutoff would still signal that business could coexist with critical speech at some calibrated level.
And for the NBA cancelled model, would continuity in China have changed league strategy elsewhere?
This logically leads us to portfolio diversification. With uninterrupted China streams, the league's risk calculus might have leaned less on redundancy in other regions. However, recent years already incentivized diversification. A tolerant outcome would also have offered a template for crisis de-escalation. Allow speech, avoid punitive distribution decisions, communicate mutual respect. In conclusion for this question, a non-cutoff scenario would likely have softened the chilling narrative, modestly stabilized revenue expectations, and encouraged more open but carefully framed athlete activism.
Professor, what are the unresolved issues in Kanter's activism today? Where are the real gaps we have not closed?
Several remain. First, transnational repression and mobility rights. His 2017 passport cancellation and subsequent wanted list placement illustrate systemic vulnerabilities for dissidents, and this is not resolved globally. Second, supply chain accountability related to forced labor in Xinjiang. Laws exist, but enforcement and verifiable tracing remain uneven. Third, institutional speech norms. Leagues and corporations still lack transparent frameworks that balance employee expression with international market engagement. Fourth, contested causality in employment outcomes. He asserts that activism cost him an NBA role, while the NBA denies any punitive action, and analysts cite basketball fit. Absent discovery-level evidence, the debate endures. Fifth, inclusion frameworks in sport. His 2026 WNBA declaration, framed as a rules test, intersects with complex questions of eligibility, fairness, and the non-instrumentalization of vulnerable communities. This area demands careful, good faith policy design.
Can we say that further research should be both empirical and ethical? What specifically should scholars and policymakers study next?
Yes. Empirically, we need robust measurement of market retaliation to athlete speech, natural experiments comparing viewership, sponsorship, and distribution decisions across jurisdictions. We also need supply chain auditing methods with open verification to assess forced labor risk without proprietary opacity. Legally, clearer protections for diaspora activists against cross-border pressure. Institutionally, publishable league policies on speech that articulate thresholds, process, and appeal. Sunlight reduces suspicion. Ethically, inclusive sport frameworks that safeguard dignity while maintaining competitive integrity, designed with input from affected communities rather than over them. Finally, case study pedagogy. Students learn well from concrete, longitudinal narratives such as this one. To summarize, Enes Kanter Freedom is both a productive NBA center by the record and a high-visibility human rights advocate. His shoes and statements converted arenas into global forums, and the reactions from a China streaming cutoff to Turkish legal pressure revealed how tightly sports, politics, and commerce are braided. We explored three questions: what a Kentucky season might have changed, how continued streaming might have softened the perceived costs of speech, and which unresolved issues remain in law, markets, and governance. For further study, examine the interplay between athlete expression, authoritarian leverage, and corporate policy in transnational contexts.
That was helpful to think through, actually. Thank you, Professor. And thanks to everyone listening.
This then completes our present analysis. Thank you for joining us, and until next time, keep your reasoning transparent and your conclusions proportionate to your evidence.